because it's such a primal struggle in there. You know, all our attention is on surviving it and dealing with it. So yeah, you can't actually be depressed or worried in those moments. We're free. They were talking about how at birth, it's the shock of the cold on our skin. No matter where we are in the world, it's the shock of the cold on our skin that forces us to take the first breath, that opens the lungs and basically brings us alive. So It's the cold that brings us alive. In May, June, July, if the weather is decent around the full moon, we'd have 2,000 people on the beach.
Holy
2,500 people. Yeah.
Right.
And it's really, I can say this in all honesty, I don't know how it has happened. I think it's opening up the possibility that everything can change, and everything can change very quickly.
Welcome to the Rut Reset Podcast, where I dig deep, deep, deep into real, natural, accessible, and even out-of-the-box ways to shake up your mind and fire up your life. I'm here to bring you chats with the most interesting and authentic people that I can find, people who may have radically different perspectives and alternative views. If you like the sound of what I'm doing, please hit the subscribe button or follow button right now and just take a moment to do that. Without it, I simply can't grow the channel. And if you do, in return, I am going to continue to find the very best people that I feel will add true value to your life. Kicking things off with that goal in mind, I've got the absolutely wonderfully brilliant Niall O'Murchu with me. Niall's an actual wellness guru, not a woo-woo pretend one. And he, 7 or 8 years ago, pioneered bringing cold therapy to Ireland. He runs the Blissful Breath Academy, training up breathwork teachers. And he's written 2 powerful books, The Blissful Breath and The Power of Cold. That last one got a shout out on Oprah Winfrey's site. He's got his own podcast, the Breathe With Niall Podcast, and co-hosts Finding the Others, dropping wisdom on wellness and growing as a human being. Niall's all about empowering people worldwide with breath, nature, and the cold. So really, he's absolutely perfect to kick us off. And so, with that in mind, here we go. It's not like I have come prepared with questions, but it's worth saying that you are the first podcast. That you are the first podcast in this new series.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you. I appreciate that. We've been on many podcasts together over the years, and always enjoyable.
We have actually. It was 7 years since the first one.
What?
Yeah, I went back to have a look.
The time has just flown. The time has. I can't believe it's 7 years. Jesus, a lot has happened in those 7 years for sure.
That's what I'm trying to talk to you about. But like, had you done other podcasts before talking to me?
I had done maybe a few, but even the whole podcast genre category was kind of new back then.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
there was big podcasts, but the kind of beginning of people doing their own podcast hadn't really happened. So you were kind of very much ahead of that. I did plenty of podcasts afterwards, but I think you're one of the first kind of big ones. It felt like a kind of a big experience because you had a great setup in your house with the mics and the cameras.
It's funny, I looked back at the start of our podcast just to see how we were carrying on together and just to see how it was set up. Like, I mean, I was doing an awful lot of pricking at the start of our interview where I was going back trying to get the microphone right. I mean, I left that in. There was no reason to leave that in, but I sort of liked the authenticity of it or the ordinariness of it.
But I think that's definitely, I don't know if you call it a style, but that reflects where the kind of internet is, I think. Before that, with TV, when you're on TV or something, it's so staged. It's especially live TV or whatever. It's so fake. But what you're talking about is so real. It's just like, oh, there we are getting the mics together. And now since then with social media, that's what we kind of expect from people. We expect to see that it's real,
Yeah.
even though sometimes that might be fake as well.
Mm.
We do expect to see. So I like the way you kind of leave in all those little bits. It's really good. It makes it seem genuine.
Yeah. I think that's what I was trying to capture. But the thing I used to do also was not tell people when I pressed record. So
Yeah,
it was like to try to continue because so there wouldn't be that feeling of on, oh, I'm on now. And it's
yeah.
like
I think
I found that what I noticed was that people that it was when you turn off the recording, everybody go, oh, now we can have the chat. Like,
I because I
are we
was just
done? We're off. Yeah.
yeah I was just I did a podcast, Image Media or Image Magazine. I'm not sure which they go by. They have a series of podcasts called the Wellness Project, and like that. Now, it's like a setup like your old setup, like with the cameras and the lights and everything. And like that, we were having a good chat beforehand, and the minute they go, okay, now officially on, it just changes. It just
Yeah.
changes things a little bit. So I think you're right to kind of put it on at the beginning and just let the whole thing kind of flow instead of having an official start point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we actually went for a swim. So we met
Hmm.
for a cold swim. That was our first interaction. And the first question I asked you was, have you ever met somebody for the first time and your first interaction with them being for a cold swim? And you said something like, well, it's very interesting to watch somebody in stress and how
Yeah,
they cope with it. And I was
yeah.
kind of going, how did I do?
Did you pass the
Did I
test,
pass
Frank?
the test?
But it's
Yeah.
you kind of, maybe I was kind of pointing to the idea that we get to know people really well when they're under pressure.
Hmm.
So in work maybe, but like I go back to my kind of sporting days, and you really get to know people in high pressure situations in sport because you're
Yeah.
kind of working towards this goal, but you also see what they're really good at, and you also see what they're not so good at, because as a team you have to fill in those gaps. So I
Hmm.
think, and the cold is like that. You can kind of get a glimpse into what people are like in the cold.
Yeah, but maybe in work though, you can sort of maybe if you're playing a game in the work world, you can kind of blame people. But
Yeah.
when it comes to the cold, you're on your own, like in a
There's not,
sense. Yeah.
but and what I found over all those years since our first podcast is when people are in the cold, all the masks come down, all the
Mm.
vulnerabilities come out, because in that moment when you get into the cold, you can no longer hold on to the persona or whatever that you've kind of built up. You are just raw in there.
Yeah.
And I think that can be very refreshing for people. I think that's part of the much deeper reasons why people feel so amazing after the cold, is that they had a chance just to let go of all that stuff.
Mm. It's funny you say that because one of the most striking lines ever about the cold was when I was in your house, and it was actually Joe Rooney was sitting in the kitchen, and he had come out of the ice bath, and he said he's just turned to you and said something like, "You can't even be depressed in there." I thought, well, that actually fucking says it all. And then you said, "Did you hear the expression to go to the sea to drown the miserable
Yes.
man?" And that was that conversation. And I actually think in those couple of sentences that encapsulates
Yeah.
so much about it.
Because it's such a primal struggle in there.
Mm.
All our attention is on surviving it and dealing with it. So yeah, you can't actually be depressed or worried in those moments. We're free in a way.
Yeah.
The battle allows us to be free. The difficult thing allows us to be free, and then we feel such relief afterwards.
Mm. Yeah, it must be like since because you were like you were just starting out when we first chatted. It must be very like I hear people only yesterday. I hear people going, "Oh no, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't get into the cold sea. I couldn't. I can't. No, 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 I can't do the cold shower. I can't. I just can't do that." And I think it's so interesting because really that's what everybody says. Like before you hear about it and your curiosity is kind of open to it, you. that is how you feel because
Mm.
your only experience of the cold really is a sort of an involuntary or the fucking shower stopped working, and
Yeah.
it's like your whole universe collapses in a moment in that shower, and then to inflict that upon yourself seems like pure insanity, really.
And Frank, it's since we had talked. So, like when I wrote my second book, The Power of Cold, a few years ago, that kind of
Lovely
conundrum,
plug, by the way. That was a
The
lovely
Power of
segue.
Cold, go buy it, go buy it. On Audible if you want to listen to it.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So when I was writing that book, that was the conundrum I was trying to untangle. Is that, for the majority of people, the cold is a toxic experience. It's something they're trying to push away. They don't want it.
Mm.
But why then is it so beneficial for us? And eventually I came across this doctor, and now they were talking about something completely different. But to me, it was the answer. They were talking about how at birth it's the shock of the cold on our skin. No matter where we are in the world, it's the shock of the cold on our skin that forces us to take the first breath, that opens the lungs and basically brings us alive. So it's
Wow.
the cold that brings us alive. And that first breath then triggers the next breath and the next breath. And for me, that was this moment of clarity. And then I thought to myself, okay, that's why the breathing and the cold are so interlinked. And that's why we push the cold away for so long. Like from that point, most people spend the rest of their life pushing the cold away
Mm.
because they've had this shock. And I suppose what I was trying to untangle in the book was to be whole again, and to learn to breathe properly again, and to kind of find a sense of calm again. Do we need to bring the cold back into our lives? And I think that's the kind of conclusion I came to. So even though people are in the hot shower and the immersion was off and now it's cold and they are the fucking and they're pushing it away, I think on the other side of that, there's been a revolution since we first talked in
Yeah.
people getting into the cold. Like when I first started, it was totally on the fringe, it was totally over there.
Mm.
And now what I feel is that the cold belongs to everyone now.
Mm.
Like the amount of people that are in the sea. Like when we went for the swim all those years ago, there was a few people in the sea, but now there are millions of people in the sea.
Mm.
And for every sauna, there's a cold plunge, and it's just now become something totally mainstream.
Mm.
And for me, I think that's great because I do feel that there's a connection between the cold and the breathing that's right there at the beginning of our life. And I do feel that for us to maybe reach our full potential or to feel whole, that we need to accept it in some way into our life. It's
Mm.
inevitable in Ireland. Like
Yeah.
lots of the months are fucking freezing,
Mm.
but maybe we just need skill or the experience to know how to accept it and how to use it.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I will take you back then because, like, if I always kind of like your story about this is just so sort of ordinary and relatable that it was something that I just have this image of you doing the slog of the grind of work, the whatever, 9 to 5, and then young kids, and then just they are called the tired years, which somebody made me feel good. But especially when the kids are young and you're slaving around the place, and then you had tried lots of different things, but you just had no energy, and then you stumbled
Yeah.
upon this. Or what
Yeah.
happened there? I sort of really think that's
Yeah,
interesting.
there was a few things. So our four children are much older, and those tired
Mm.
years,
So
what
they're
a great
raised
name
now.
for it. Yeah, they're raised, they're out for themselves. But we had four under the age of four, and at the time as well, Josie's brother had died very tragically. Josie's uncle
Mm.
and auntie. It was all this kind of grief in our lives. And I remember sitting in the park in Booterstown. There's a great playground there, and the children were running around. And I was sitting on the bench and they were
Mm.
all running around and they were like, Dad, come on and play. And I remember feeling so tired and without energy. And that's a good while ago now. And I was thinking, well, Jesus, if I'm this tired now, what am I going to be like in 10 years, 20 years? And that was kind of a big part of this feeling of being drained and being broken by the grief. Um, and then I saw Wim Hof talking about the cold and the way he just described it. And then we started doing cold shower. We get the children to bed, clean up the house, and Josie and I would do a little bit of breathing, and we'd go upstairs and do like a cold shower, and we just started to feel so different because of it.
Mm.
And the energy started to rise in us. We had more energy, stress levels are going down. And then there was just a little bit more space, a little bit more light. And that was the kind of the breaking open point for us. It all changed from that point. And it's so simple, just a little bit of cold.
Well, you see, that's what I sort of think is interesting to like if you are in that situation, right? You are fucked, tired. You're talking about grief. I mean, all of that leads to a sort of a downer, and especially if
Yeah.
you're looking towards this future and you're going, I'm not very optimistic about it. So
Yeah.
then, like, but in it is actually very uncomfortable to be in that world. And then the idea of bringing in more
Mhm.
discomfort into that world is what I think is sort of like, it's a kind of like, sorry, why would I do that?
Yeah.
Life is fucking shit enough. Why, why would you recommend taking away my only pleasure, which is a nice cold or a nice warm shower in the morning time,
Yeah.
or, you know, eating fucking shit on the couch? Why would you take away
Yeah.
your ultimate pleasure, your only pleasures? And
Yeah.
yet they're the things that are keeping you sort of
I wonder at the bottom of that experience, I wonder, do we have to reach a point, which myself and Josie had definitely reached, of desperation? You
Mhm.
know, yeah, the idea of adding more difficulty into our life, on one hand, is like, oh, we can't take any more of this. The cold is a stress. We can't take any more of this stress. But on
Mhm.
the other hand, I suppose that's what kind of gave us the inspiration to do it. We needed help. We needed something, and we were desperate for change.
Yeah.
Um,
You were
and I
you were
think,
open though, like really. It's sort of an interesting thing to be kind of
yeah,
open to something like that, as opposed to, just
yeah,
flicking past it would be
I know,
normally
I
the
know,
reaction. Who's
I
this mad
know.
Dutchman? I mean, I'll no, thank you.
But I suppose for me personally, it's because I had been open to meditation and breathing and, all those things for a long, long time. So when I heard Wim talking about the cold, I think it was this point at which there's this kind of clip on one of the old Vice documentaries when there's a camera angle and you're looking up and he's dived into the ice. He's kind of trying to break this world record. And he talks about the cold as being like a god,
Mm.
like a primal force. And for my interests are always in the deeper kind of experiences in life. And so for me, that was like the hook. I
Mm.
thought to myself, the cold as a god, the cold as this primal force. That's what for me was the thing
Mm.
that got me over the little hump of, will I turn the cold? And I was thinking, Jesus, what does it feel like? To kind of feel divine? Can it feel otherworldly?
Yeah.
And that was for me, that was the hook for me. That, obviously all the benefits are great, but for me, the profound side of it as well is a big draw.
It's interesting, both of you decided to do it. Like, I mean, my wife would get into the sea now,
Yeah,
many years later, but she'll get into the sea and she'll still do
yeah,
the whole dancing in, like the one
yeah.
foot in, one foot out game. And we were only, we were actually talking about it all those years ago. It was kind of like you are really prolonging the pain, but
Yeah.
whatever way you want to do it, knock yourself out. But it's interesting. Both you obviously were aligned. It's an interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I do wonder about that. Uh, you know, obviously we only have our own relationship, so it's impossible to kind of see into other people's relationships.
Mm.
But for Josie and I, we ended up meeting each other in work. She sat down beside me in work, and we became friends, and that was the beginning of it all.
Okay.
Um, but it that kind of that maybe shared desperation and that's shared kind of discovery of the code and the breathing. Now we work together all the time. Like
Mm.
Josie is the puppet master behind the scenes of what we do, and so now that's kind of developed. That shared kind of experience of looking for the code has developed into the business, into the whole experience.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. So it obviously, not to go too linear in time, but well, I suppose I'm curious, a kind of a sidestep, and you can tell me how much you want to talk about this, but what's the story with the Wim Hof and all that? Is you sort of get you get vibes from the internet. I don't really pay attention to much, but yeah, you don't have to talk about it now if you don't want to, but what's your,
Yeah, so from my experience, I was a Wim Hof instructor for 7 years, probably
hmm,
7, 8 years. Um, you could argue probably one of the most experienced, one of the most high profile instructors around. And
hmm,
but for me, what I always felt was the Wim Hof method, obviously the breathing particularly, is a great starting point for people. For people who don't know, there's like these long breath holds in it. But my mind started to turn to, what about pregnant people? What breathing can they do to keep themselves healthy? And they can't do the Wim Hof method, for example. Or what about people who are really young or really sick? And that kind of started my curiosity into looking at different ways of breathing. And
hmm.
that then really became the thing that I became most interested in, is ways of breathing that are, better breathing for everyone is really what we're kind of moving towards now. So it's just a very natural thing then, that I feel that if I'm teaching something, I have to be practicing it.
Hmm.
So slowly my own practice moved away from Wim Hof breathing. I was looking into all these different types of breathing, and so as I then progressed, I felt I couldn't really teach people Wim Hof breathing if I wasn't practicing it myself.
Hmm.
So there was this kind of natural move away from it. And then in the last year or so, I suppose, to put it kind of diplomatically, what I feel are my core values of what I
Don't
do,
put
and
it diplomatically.
yeah, and this
You
the
know who you're
standards,
talking to here.
the kind of
You're in safe
standards,
territory.
the standards that I kind of hold myself and our business to. I don't think they were being shared, by the company that was looking after the Wim Hof method. So there was a kind of natural time for me just to step away. So I stepped away
That's totally
not last
diplomatic.
year.
We're going to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
deeper here. We'll go digging here. Well, just as the quick aside, I do remember I didn't like how they sort of were restrictive.
Mm,
In my impression of it was they were quite restrictive of how you could make a living, which I just thought like, sorry now, you don't own anything, you don't own breathing, you don't own the cold, you don't own anything here. So, and it's ever fresh and new, this cold we share that we've talked about at the start. So then don't be telling your instructors and everybody what you can and can't do online. Am I right about that? Now, I just felt that you're not allowed to do online courses or all those years ago under that umbrella. That was their
yeah.
area. Is that
I
true?
suppose as their brands start to grow, they had very very strict kind of rules on what instructors can and can't do.
Hmm.
And I, like yourself, have an entrepreneurial spirit. So I found that I was trying to, like, I would do something here and that wasn't allowed then. And I would do something here and that wasn't allowed then.
Hmm.
And I just felt, as well as my hunger for understanding the breathing and the cold beyond just the Wim Hof method, I was kind of, I was expanding, but bumping into the rules all the time.
Hmm.
So it was just, for me, it was just like a natural. I wanted to then teach. People were asking me, okay, how do we teach children and teenagers to breathe, to deal with stress and anxiety? How do we, and for me, that was such an interesting place to go to.
Hmm.
Um, and so eventually it was just like, I kind of felt I didn't need it anymore.
Student,
I
the
wasn't
student
teaching it.
and the master.
Yeah, and that's like when, so we have, JC and I co-founded the Blissful Breath Academy last year, and we teach people how to be breathwork teachers. And I'm
Hmm.
always saying to the teachers that we teach, look, your job is to become better than me, to
Hmm.
take it to places that I can't take it to take, as you said, breathing, but it's, in my opinion, the breathing and the cold belong to everyone.
Hmm.
So when we're teaching people to be breathwork teachers, we're saying to them, look, we're teaching you how to do it like this, but take this experience, add it to your own experience, and make it your own.
Hmm.
And what's happening is now, So we have like you could argue like one approach is like the old software approach of like a bespoke system that you have to be tied into. And the other approach is like an open source one that's, everything is available to everyone to do
Mm.
what they want. And what we're finding is because we have this kind of an open source approach to teaching the breathing, that the teachers are now taking it into places where I could never go and doing things I could never do with it because they're taking it back to their own specific communities or their own specific companies or their own places, and it's just fascinating to see it
I
growing.
actually was tempted. I might talk to you about that. I saw some of
Mm,
the stuff in the academy, and I thought, oh, this is very interesting.
yeah,
How
yeah.
long? I'll talk to you about it again. But what are the? How long is a course? Typical course?
So we have the first level, level one, it's like 4 weeks prep at home, like 10 minutes a day breathing, basically,
Mhm.
for 4 weeks, and then we bring people into the Kleiny Castle hotel, not too far from you up the road, and it's 3 intense days then of training and assessments, and but it's what I love about it is we've made it so it's mostly learning through doing. We put, and again, it brings back. So, one of my great basketball coaches used to say to us that training sessions are so difficult, and he would say that we make the training sessions so difficult that the games become easy.
Mm.
So, when we're teaching people to be breathwork teachers, we put them into scenarios where they have to teach it in the classes straight away. They have to teach with people watching them straight away. It's like it's like that basketball coach. We put them in a scenario that's very difficult so then when they go out to teach afterwards, it's
Yeah.
easier to do. So and I think all of those things were probably not possible if I had stayed within the Wim Hof brand.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a very natural, very curious mind for an entrepreneurial spirit. It was a very natural thing to kind of just to start to spread out and to look for more answers because breathing is such a vast universe of a subject.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because so since I probably haven't spoken to you too much about that over the last few years, or but when I was on having a nose around your website, I thought it was very. I just thought it was very interesting. I thought I kind of like there's an awful lot. The way I'd look at say meditation or breathing, or there's a huge amount that is tied to it that is sort of linked with kind of effort and not effort and mysticism and guru isms and all these things. And I sort of just kind of go, well, I mean, if you want to feel good, just go breathing. And there's
Yes.
obviously ways to do it even better. And I look at it sort of, if you do breathing, you're going to feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
as simple as
so
that.
you're not going to nirvana, but then people do have experiences. People's, depending on, I'm sure that must happen. Does it? Where in your
Oh,
class people have
so
sort of mad
at the end
experiences.
of like the 3 days, like we start on a Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. By the end of that, having spent basically 3 days breathing, practicing breathing, people have huge experiences because our life is so hectic.
Mm,
And really the more time we spend paying attention to our breathing, firstly, the better we feel.
mm,
But then what's beyond feeling better? Then we start to have much more clarity about things because
mm,
it's hard to have clarity about decisions in life or things when our mind is full of thoughts and fears and worries. So after like the 2 or 3 days of breathing, and that's why we kind of put it together so intensely, people really feel very different. And
mm,
the hope is then, and we have lots of support for them afterwards. The hope is then that they continue to breathe a little bit every day, because a little bit every day, even 10 minutes, as you know, even 10 minutes every day, can have this massive effect on how we feel.
mm.
Um, so as you said, yes, we can reach states of uh, great bliss, great insight, great meaning regularly with breathing. It's not like it's a elusive thing. It's like
Mm.
there's very much a formula. Like if you want to
Yeah,
breathe for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, 40 minutes, you are going to feel very different than you did at the beginning. In
yeah.
fact, one way to kind of describe it, if we're going to commit that much time and effort to it, at the end of that much breathing, it feels like nothing's a problem anymore
Mm.
because we have a little bit more space between our thoughts. They're
Yeah.
not, they're not crowding in on us as much.
Yeah, well, I sort of like it's. I think in a sense, like I'm a runner, and I, when if I like, and if I'm not running, if I haven't been running for a little while, I get this kind of nod from Nuala to go, "Oh, I think somebody needs a run," which is
You put the shoes out in front of you.
which is the most fucking annoying thing you can possibly hear. Because it really is. Because you kind of go, and it's like the last thing you need in that moment of time is to go out and hit the road. But it's in that world, it's like you exhaust that rah rah rah. It's
Yeah,
like, but it's like the same idea as, let's say, let's play with it even. You go to the sea to drown the miserable man, and likewise with, I guess with breathing, it's a sort of that choo-choo train in the end comes to a stop. It might be
yeah,
loads of resistance at the start.
yeah.
It might be, but for a while the lunatic goes to sleep for is it's like you exhaust that
Yeah,
relentless chatterboxer who just go
yeah,
okay
yeah,
and shut the fuck up for a
I
while.
think I think well, think about what running is. Running is breathing.
Mm,
It is putting the body into a place where it's breathing, 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 breathing. And
mm,
as you said at the beginning, when we're warming up, it's the body's warming up, it's tight, all that kind of stuff. But there is a point in running or any kind of sport where everything is flowing.
mm,
The breathing is working, everything. Now you might come back out of that at some point, but whatever the practice is, what I've realized over the years is that no matter what the practice or experience, our breathing is an essential part of it.
mm,
So pick any human experience. And even though we mightn't be paying attention to it, our breathing is always there and it's always reflecting how we feel.
mm,
So if we're feeling like when a runner is in that flow and they're breathing and they're breathing and they're breathing, their breathing will be smooth and
mm,
rhythmic. And likewise, when they're struggling up the hill, their breathing will reflect that pressure and that struggle as well.
mm. Can I talk to you? Like, I was thinking about this idea of meditation. I remember
Mm-hmm.
reading something years ago, and it kind of stuck with me, like that everything is meditation in reality.
Mm-hmm.
That and obviously there are a gazillion techniques of meditation, and there's a lot with the breath that I just don't even know about. But there is if you take running for example, and I want to see, is there a link? And there's a while where you get lost in the running, and it's like you sort of the whinger, the complaining who says this is horrendous, I want to stop, please let it stop, I hate it so much, is gone. And then
Mm-hmm.
you don't know uh, where the bridge is. It's suddenly the only thing you do know is when you go, oh, I was lost in thought there.
Yes.
And I sense that, say, breathing and the meditation is sort of like you see you're focusing on a mantra, and then there's a moment of, uh, oh, I've stopped focusing on the mantra, and it's,
Yes.
it's like, but there was a period of lostness.
Yeah. 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 And you only kind of realize that as you come out of it,
Yeah. So you
because
don't the 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 moment of going into it, you don't know, because like you can't go, well, I'm going to go into that. You're
yeah,
just gone. There's whatever, and then there's suddenly
and
oh,
you're
I was
back.
lost in thought. I need to go back to the
Yeah.
mantra now.
Yeah.
And is it similar?
Yeah. And what I love about what you're describing there, it brings to mind this this idea that I've been really thinking about. It's probably going to be part of the next book, but uh, in yoga, Iyengar, the master yoga teacher, always talked about the mind controlling the body,
Hmm.
but the breath controlling the mind. So it's like what we're talking about there. You go out for the run, and the mind, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I want to stop. Is influencing the body. But somewhere along, as you start to breathe and move, the breath starts to control the mind, starts to slow the mind down, and then that influences the body.
Mm.
And then, in yoga philosophy, they were saying when the breath and the mind are combined, then there's just that nothingness that all the fluctuations of the minds begin to cease. So there
Yeah.
is a union somewhere along the line where the breath influences the mind to a point at which, for a moment or two, we're lost in thought.
Mm.
And I suppose that applies to everything. It applies to running. It applies to, I'm sure artists feel that as well. When there's a
In
point at
flow,
which they're,
yeah.
yeah, they're just there. And I can definitely remember from playing basketball. There's points where everything is just, as you said, in flow. Everything is just at that balance.
Mm.
Where not you feel you could do anything. Now and then you come out of it the other side. So, and I heard a Formula One driver describing it in different terms, but very similarly. When they're flying around at 200 miles an hour, they're not really thinking. They're
Mm.
just reacting and flowing with it. And again, when they come out of that, that's when he was saying that when they come out of that flow state, that's when it's very dangerous, because then you're thinking, oh shit,
Yeah,
where
it's
have I
like
gone?
you have to concentrate again, or
Yeah,
you're doing it, and I think that's what's it's sort of like that movement. Then I just find it very interesting that there's suddenly the concentrating on whatever it is gonzo, and
yep,
then there's just and that's almost indescribable, but which is
yep.
not making it. That makes when you use words like it's almost indescribable, it makes it seem like, oh, it's really fancy. No, it's just it's because really your only trace of it really is when you come back out and you go, oh, I was
Yep.
I was lost for a while there.
Gone somewhere. And I
Yeah.
think that those moments of being lost somewhere, or those moments of the mind just becoming still to a point that, there's no thoughts at all, is very, very refreshing for us. And we feel good afterwards. It's
Yeah,
like,
sort of
it's like
craving our own absence, really. Yeah.
yeah, we've had a chance to just take a break, and we come back a little bit refreshed. The mind can kick back in, we can start thinking about those things again, but we're refreshed.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. So you obviously like I remember I obviously follow on Instagram and I see like that the beach would slowly but not even slowly, really quickly actually, that beach of yours just seemed to be full like of
Yeah,
people. That
it's
must be very interesting, like to have 300-400 people on the beach breathing or well, I don't know the figures, but it seems like a lot of
sometimes in the summertime, like let's say where are we now? We're April, so let's say May, June, July. If the weather is decent around the full moon,
yeah.
we'd have 2,000 people on the beach, two and
Holy
a half
fuck,
thousand
man.
people. Yeah,
Right.
and it's really, I can say this in all honesty, I don't know how it has happened.
Mm.
Christine and I, Christine started it years ago. She brought me on, and it just has turned into this thing that I think it's pulling together different needs from people. One
Mm.
is people love getting outside and an excuse to get outside. So it's an excuse to come to the beach. On a much deeper level, I think people are more interested now in the different cycles of nature. So like we're under the full moon. So it's kind of like that draws some people in. The fact that it is free, and it's yoga and it's breathing and all those things, that attracts people in. But I think the thing that people don't understand until they get there is there's something magical about 2,000 people sitting on the beach just breathing together. And
Mm.
Christine plays her drum and just guides people through a meditation. And everyone's welcome. Like we have children, we have old people, we have dogs, we have everything you can imagine, all types of people. And there's a few moments, like you're saying, when you're kind of lost in that moment. There have been a few moments over the last 4 or 5 years that we've done it that have been just otherworldly,
Mm.
otherworldly. Like 2,000 people there were doing a little bit of breathing, and the clouds clear, and there's the full moon just sitting there on the
Oh wow,
horizon.
yeah, yeah.
It's like, I think that's part of the reason it's become as kind of popular for some people as it is that we're always there. We're there every month, and so people come and go. but it's just a chance to, I don't
Yeah,
know, feel something.
you're never going back to an office. That's for fucking sure.
I don't
Not
think I
with
could.
that. It is interesting though, like as an entrepreneur, that when you start like whatever it is, approximately 7 years, obviously then
Mm,
because it was around the time doing the podcast that people sell shit all over the place. Solutions to their lives, and they have marketing. We both know marketing
yeah,
very well. But it's so interesting that how you grew was offering something that was the total opposite of the usual marketing thing, which was get
yeah,
into the fucking freezing cold,
yeah.
ice
I
baths,
know.
discomfort. And who would have thought like that could grow and become so popular? It's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
I think it was it. I think we were in the right place at the right time
Mm.
when there's been a shift in everything. Maybe it's modern life is overwhelming for people, so they're looking for some way of dealing with it. I think that's a factor. I think
Mm.
COVID as well is a massive factor. The reaction to all of that, and afterwards, people are questioning how they spend their time and how they want to live. And like you were saying, do they want to go into an office all the time?
Mm.
Do they want this and want that? And I think part of that, the answer to some of those questions is, how do we look after ourselves? You know, how do we get out of the rut, as you were saying earlier?
Mm. And do you like how do you feel about this sort of role? I mean, let me see how I phrase this. I don't know. In a sense, you are there at the top of the beach. You're helping people with breathing and with cold. You're teaching people how to become teachers, and there's a lot in the sort of in that role. People can project stuff onto you. How do you
Mm.
deal with all that stuff?
Well, I remember years ago when it all kind of started, and things were kind of getting big for Josie and myself, and events were selling out. I came back from, I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was a big beach event or something. And my mom was in the house and she was looking after the girls, the twins who were really young. And she said, "How will you keep your feet on the ground with all this stuff going on?" And at the time, I
That's
was
all you need is a
changing a
mammy close
nappy.
by. Yeah.
Yeah, I was changing a nappy, and I was like, "This is what keeps me." So we go
Mm.
from the beach and all that, and I have dirty nappies to change at home. So um, I think my approach is always it's about the breath, it's about the cold, it's about the teachings.
Mm.
It's about those are the things. I'm just helping people kind of find their way to those things, but it's about the actual teachings,
Mm.
and also those four young children are now four teenagers. So if anything was to kind of test you and keep you grounded and keep you, in things in perspective, it's coming home to a house full of teenagers. That'll do it.
Well, yeah, but yeah. But it's very different in the language you use also. You're not kind of promising nirvana or enlightenment or it's not infused with that sort of thing. It's sort of very different. It's very kind of practical. That's like, and I think the backstory is sort of practical of and also the cold itself. It's not like you suddenly become brilliant at the cold.
No,
You
you
mean
never do. It's
you're not
always
going,
like,
oh,
no.
do you know what I'd love more than anything now is a cold bath and whatever. But you
For the
probably do a cold. Do you do a nice bath every day?
Yeah, most days, and again, it's not necessary. My understanding of the cold has changed over the years, and I understand now that it's not necessary for people to be in the cold every day. Like our time in the cold should expand and decrease depending on how we are and how we feel, and for
Okay.
women their cycle and all that kind of stuff. But for me, teaching it, I feel I have to be practicing it.
Mm.
I feel I have to be down there in the depths as well. Um, but to go back to what you were saying, I love words. I really I find words very fascinating, and I think they're very important. So when I'm trying to describe things or write things or teach things, I I I always look at a word, and if it's any kind of way ambiguous, I try to find a way to describe it that's clearer.
Mm.
So, and the example of that is for whatever reason, people in the last couple of podcasts that I've been doing have been saying to me, look, is there a spiritual side to the breathing? And the word spiritual for me is kind of problematic because it means so many different things to so many different people.
Mm.
Um, Even my great friend Christine on the beach, she does the full moon healing circle with me. She's spiritual wellness Christine. And even she was talking to a PR person, and there was confusion because the PR person was saying, "Is it religious?" And Christine was saying, "No, it's not religious," and that caused some friction. So for me, the language is important. So I'd never use like a word like spiritual, not because it's not a kind of profound divine experience. It's just that I like words to be really clear.
Mm.
So as I said at the beginning, the kind of depth of all of these practices is the really thing that makes me very interested in them. But also, I try to describe them in ways that I feel are not, not confusing. There's no room for confusion.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think over the years we are both we've talked about that. I think it's in different way, like it's infused with so much the word spiritual, so much history, and so much it's just infused with so much ambiguity, and it also it's like I also think when you put words like that out there, it's sort of like people instantly compare, and you go, okay, am I having a spiritual? Is this spiritual?
Yeah,
What the fuck is spiritual? Like
yeah,
really, it's a sort of a magical word. Like you might as well call it
yeah.
or call it whatever
And
you
I,
want.
and
Like
I and I think it means so much, and there's so many words like that that mean so much to people, and so many different meanings for people.
mm,
So I kind of like to try and keep distilling down or simplifying the words until it gets to a point where I feel it's clear. But
mm,
that doesn't mean at all that it's fully pragmatic.
mm,
There is, as I said, there is a profound kind of world. There's profound experiences to be had with the breathing and the codes.
yeah,
That
there's
some
no doubt
people would
about that. Yeah.
describe as spiritual, but just
Mm.
for as an example, it's kind of words like that I try to not avoid, but I try to find a way to describe it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think if you want to like if you look at it, maybe I'm very not I'm very pragmatic probably in my language, but I too much so. But I mean I like you take a cup of coffee, for example, your mind has changed one way or another. It is
Hmm.
a mind altering substance. Obviously, you take a load of alcohol, your mind is altered, and then there's repercussions from that. And then, but you go into the cold shower, no matter how you're feeling, and you combine it with breathing, whatever way you're feeling, it's impossible for you to be feeling the same way. It's just, it is like, I mean, and actually give it a go for that alone. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, see, is it possible to feel the same way? And then I think it's reflective of really everything then. And then there are certain things that it seems like for whatever reason in life, things that appear more difficult um, end up giving better rewards. And the things that are very
mm,
easy to do sort of fuck you up in the long term,
yeah.
really.
I was up with a group of CEOs in Northern Ireland a couple of weeks ago, and I was teaching them how to use the breathing and the cold to deal with the unique pressure they face as the kind of leader of their business. And a small group, maybe 8 or 9 people. Some of them were already prepared and into it. Some of them were terrified of the experience, and
Yeah.
guiding them through the whole experience. And at the end, one young man, he's maybe mid 30s, and he had so for him, what he learned was was so terrified. Now he had said that to me a few times before we started. So of course, there's no forcing in the cold. There was no pressure at all. But when he came out the other side of the experience, having gone through it, used the breathing to deal with it, to find a sense of calm, got out, felt amazing. What he realized was that this was one of the things that was holding him back in his business, that he was often building up these situations to be these terrifying worst case scenarios, and that was crippling his decision making. But by going in and doing the code and coming out the other side, he kind of realized that it's human nature to push away from the difficult things, but often it's the difficult thing that helps us come to a new understanding of ourselves. And that for me
Yeah.
is what you're saying there. Like what's that phrase they talk about? We do the difficult things in life so life becomes easier.
Mm.
But if you only do the easy things, then life becomes quite difficult.
Yeah, I sort of think discomfort or that ability to be able to deal with difficulty is a muscle.
Mm.
And it's sort of, you can't, it's not like a bicep muscle, but there is a sort of a thing that can be slowly but surely just
Yeah,
built up in like slowly but surely, but practice or whatever, that you're just going, oh, fuck it, I'll do it. I'll ring that person. I'll do the lawns, I'll do
yeah,
the cold shower, and it's sort of like it's almost like cold shower. It's like, okay, I'll just go and do that difficult thing now
yeah,
because it's going to be fine, and it becomes stronger
yeah,
somehow or other. It seems to be the case.
yeah. It's a skill,
Hmm.
really. It's I think the word to describe it that was in kind of fashion maybe a year ago was resilience. Everyone was talking about resilience, and it's like, as you said, it's like building that muscle of resilience, that skill of resilience to
Hmm.
deal with the difficult thing.
Hmm.
And the cold teaches us that, but then life is full of loads of other
Fucking
difficult things.
shit.
We have plenty of practice.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, one way or another. Yeah, you just hide under the bed. That's another strategy. If for example somebody is like, I suppose I wonder, the idea of the cold, like, well, we haven't talked really about the actual practical wonderful benefits
Mm,
of the cold and breathing. And so I suppose if you can think back to when you were sitting on the couch and you were exhausted and uh you were kind of going, I'm just going to turn on some fucking shit TV here, and you were chatting to that human being, what would you, now that you, like 7 years later, you were teaching people not only just to breathe and get in the code, but actually teaching teachers, which is sort of really interesting. Like, what is it you would say to them, and what would you say to yourself to get you started? Say there was no videos on YouTube or whatever. What is it you would
I
say?
think it's opening up the possibility that everything can change and everything can change very quickly.
Mm,
So, so the feelings of tiredness and stress can be changed to feelings of energy and openness and calmness.
mm,
And the feelings of, oh, I'm going to get sick because I'm stressed can change to, Jesus, I haven't been sick in years.
mm,
And there just that change is possible. And the way to do that is in very small little steps. Have your beautiful hot shower, and at the end, just turn it to cold for 5 seconds.
mm.
And the next time, do it for 10 seconds. And then notice how your breathing is. And then try to calm your breathing down and slowly build it up. And what happens then is that once you get up off the couch and try it once, that's the most difficult part.
Mm.
Because once you feel a little change afterwards, then you'll say, geez, I wonder if I did it for maybe 10 seconds, but I feel a bit less stress for the rest of the day. And just that change is always possible.
I think that's a really fucking gorgeous way to put it, actually. Just to be open to the possibility that change is possible and it could happen very
Yeah.
quickly. I sort of, yeah, I think that's a really lovely way to put it.
Thank you.
Hmm.
It's true.
I sort of think when because you're in that zone, like you are fucking caught and you're sort of not able to see the
Hmm.
wood from the trees. There isn't
Yeah.
perspective. And it's like there's a wrongness or can be a wrongness to everything. Like it's like this, oh, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. and everything is sort of, you're stuck, and it's like, yeah, I just think it's very interesting. Then you're going to have to get into a cold shower though. But sorry,
but it,
that's the only part that's a bit awkward in this. But
but Frank, I think it comes back to that what we talked about. There has to be some mix of desperation and desire there as well to want to change, and
yeah,
some desperate, because if and I was like that myself, Josie and I, when we used to do kind of share the knife beads with the twins, with the girls, I'd get up, go downstairs. Let's say I was on the 3 o'clock one or something, go downstairs, get the bottles, whatever it was. And we would have like chocolate cake in the fridge sliced up that we could take a slice of at 3 o'clock in the morning and eat to,
yeah,
to change the nappies, to go through that. And eventually that just wasn't enough anymore.
mm.
It wasn't able to get us through it. So, as I said, that desperation has to be mixed then with that desire to want to change as well.
Yeah, there's a guy, I don't know if you're into Bitcoin or any, but there's a guy called Michael Saylor, and he's a real proponent. His whole business actually which has grown exponentially, is all around Bitcoin. He just
Okay.
transformed the business, and he said Bitcoin really is a sort of a need. You
Yeah.
sort of in a financial situation where things are tough, and you need, or it's not quite desperation. He didn't use that word, but I sort of think they're kind of linked. That
Yeah.
need will drive you somewhere else, and
Yeah.
actually the need and that desperation is a sort of a gift, because
Hmm.
probably the door will be open to something as radical, even though probably now, you see, I'd say it's always there, this cold opportunity, and
Hmm.
this, and going back to breathing. I sort of feel that it's obviously been forever there, and I
Yeah.
think it's the sort of thing that could just as easily go back and not be talked about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it could easily just fall away in a world of comfort and everything being done, AI, all that. It could totally fall away again.
Yeah. In fact, I expected to, because
Mm.
um, I remember when I was a teenager growing up in Portmarnock, North County Dublin, and I'd go in for a jump into the sea. Now, I just enjoyed it. It wasn't for anything more than that. But there was only old people at the sea.
Yeah.
And even 7 or 8 years ago, like when we went down to the sea, it was more likely previous generations that were there. And I do get the sense that now we're a generation or two of people, and everyone goes to the sea, and people have dry robes and the saunas at the sea. But I do look around and think, will it be the case in 20, 30 years that we'll all be the old people?
Mhm.
And it's like, sure, only the old people get in the sea. And like the
Yeah.
next two generations will forget it for a while. And then
Yeah.
it'll come back again. Myself and we were in, where were we? We were in Wexford, and we went to some abbey, some beautiful abbey. And in the grounds of this beautiful abbey, they had a river that was running through it with all these rocks, and they had this exhibition or display, and you walked through the water onto the rocks and massaged the bottom of your feet. And they had this note here about how cold therapy was used 200 or 300 years ago,
Mm.
and in this abbey they used to use it to help people to feel better, and it struck me that this is obviously nothing new to humans. We've been using it, but it also struck me that there seems to be these cycles that it comes. So a
Mm.
couple of 100 years ago, it was used in hospitals all over Europe as a way of dealing with sickness, and then that
Mm.
disappears, and then it comes back again. And I'm just wondering, um, when it disappears again, what would be the catalyst for bringing it back?
Yeah, I think probably I think probably it's the extremes of a world of too much comfort, that
Mm,
where everything is at the end of a finger, that I think it's sort of, there is a craving for the basics and
mm,
like the just natural, simple living. I think the complexity of modern life, sort of that it's like conversation, or all there's just so much bullshit out there. Like, I mean, especially now, it's just everywhere,
Mm.
everywhere. Absolute fucking nuts, nuts. Like, it's a nut show. Like, it really is a nut show. I mean, wherever you look, and I'm talking vast majority is just, it's a nut world. So I think the nuttier it gets, the more it's sort of people go, okay, no, I need to get out of this.
Yeah.
And I think the camaraderie going uh, in for a sea swim, like you described, you get to see there's nowhere to go really.
Mm.
You know, there's no hero in the sea. You're not going to come out and be, oh, he's the best at getting into the sea. Like, well, good luck with that. You know, because really, it's sort of survival, and then in
Yeah.
that survival, the ordinariness happens. I think
Yeah.
that we crave.
Yeah. I think a reaction to the complexity is the simplicity.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah. I like that. Yeah. I would say that the cold is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. And I think you kind of alluded to it earlier as well. It never gets easy.
Hmm.
It's not like a practice that you become complacent about. Like there's never one time where I go out to the ice bath out there, which I'll be going out to later on, and you stand beside it and you look into it and think, this is gonna be, this is no bother.
Well, because if it is, you go, okay, well, I put a bit more ice in, and
Yeah.
just to fuck it
but
up. Yeah.
but I think there's something kind of very humbling about that as well, is coming into contact with a power that's way stronger than we are. Like the cold
Mm.
is this ferocious, and I was really reminded of that recently. And in January, I brought a group from Ireland to Poland for the full kind of winter experience there, and we climbed up the mountains in shorts and all that
Oh,
kind of
wow.
stuff in the snow.
And that was
And
not connected at all to, okay, this is
no, no,
all Breathe with Niall.
yeah. So we went over, had a great time, and climbed up the mountains, and but it was again a humbling experience. The cold and its absolute raw fury up there on the top of the mountain. Like 60-kilometer winds, minus 12
I
degrees.
fucking,
You,
yeah.
you're shown who the boss is. So
Mm.
every time we're standing beside the ice bath and we're getting in, it's like a little reminder that we are a part of nature, but there are very strong forces in nature that we have to be very respectful of as well.
Well, you're also there, like I know you're time 11:11, but you have to deal with that cold, but you also have to sort of, you're keeping an eye on everyone. That's interesting.
Yeah, the roles now are different. When I'm bringing people up the mountain, I am fully clothed for the
Yeah.
first time in
Okay.
years.
Right.
It's the
Yeah.
only time I actually wear clothes is going up the mountain.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the roles are different. We have to be totally safe and totally focused on everyone else's safety.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
so we
Yeah.
stick the trousers on.
That sort of makes sense. Yeah. Your time is probably coming to an end, is it?
A few more minutes would be all good.
Okay, yeah, very good. So tell me, what's the crack overall plans or anything like what have you got going? You're seeing a third book. That's pretty
Mm,
prolific.
Yeah, there's a book kind
What's
of
the
bubbling
first one was
away.
Breathe with Niall.
The first one was The Blissful Breath,
Oh, Blissful Breath, sorry, yeah.
and the second one is The Power of Cold,
Okay.
and the third one, I have no idea. It's an idea bubbling in the back there somewhere.
Right, yeah.
Um, but the kind of things that I'm wrestling with at the moment are, this connection between the mind and the breath, and the breath controlling the mind, and how we can use that to our advantage. And but also then the bigger question: if the breath, so if the mind controls the body and the breath controls the mind, what's controlling the breath?
Hmm.
So some of these other deeper questions are the ones I'm wrestling with at the moment.
Well, I'm happy to talk to you about
I
that.
have no idea what's going on beyond the
Yeah,
breath.
nor do I. Yeah. Mm. The mystery, the infinite mystery of
Yeah,
aliveness.
yeah. So, and then besides kind of those philosophical battles, the real focus is now we have a summer full of. We're about to put our schedule up for the summer, so loads of great nice events outside, enjoying the breathing outside, and of course the Blissful Breath Academy, our teacher training stuff is a big focus as well. So
Okay.
it's
And
all very exciting.
you've online stuff too where people can go on do a course.
Yeah, so we have the Breathe With Neil app, which is over 100 recordings of me guiding people through, different types of breathing sessions, very calming ones, short ones, long ones. And then we have uh, online breathwork teacher training as well. Level 1 and level 2 will
Right.
be online as well by May. So the whole idea is we've had people fly into Dublin from Egypt, from the UK, from loads of places to do the breathwork training. So it became obvious very quickly that we needed to get an online version of it, so people, not everyone can afford to come to Dublin.
Yeah.
Um, so that's been kind of a big focus behind the scenes as well.
You must be very happy with the whole thing. Like it's very successful. It's really working very
Yeah,
well.
it's I every day I wake up and think, well, how did I get here?
Mm.
What's going on? But just know, keep being open and keep being curious. And um, when people were asking me about the online training, for example, there's lots of things that impediments to that. But I always feel like, if okay, it's a sign, people are looking for it, go do it. So it's
Yeah.
so trying to listen for those kind of signals, those messages, and that information, and then just follow, see where it takes us.
And tell me your four nippers. What do they think of all this? Do they get
Um,
involved? Do they get do they go? Do they what's their general vibe on the whole
so
thing?
so our lads are 16 and 14, and they are uh, big into martial arts and basketball, or their kind of sports.
Okay,
So
two loves of yours.
yeah, so breathing and the cold, actually, and this is what makes my life easier, are huge parts of both those sports now.
Yeah.
So where
Right.
before they weren't. So they have an inbuilt interest. They'll go for their shower after training, and they'll have a cold shower, for example, and they feel that it really helps them deal with the rage that comes with teenage years. The girls now are 12 going on 27, and
Mm.
um, they approach it very differently. They're very interested in the breathing, a little bit less so in the colds,
Mm.
but they have a little kind of cold shower at the end of their normal shower as well. And
Okay.
but I think I told you the story before, Frank, about when the girls were a little bit younger, and their teacher was talking about what parents did for a living, and their teacher had bought my books. I'd signed them for her, and they asked the two girls what your dad or mom does for a living, and they said, "Oh, my dad's an accountant."
Ah, well, that
So
avoids
there's
all the
that.
questions. That's great. Okay,
So
moving on. And
yeah.
you, Johnny, what does your daddy do?
And it was even the teacher had told us, because she obviously knew. But so there's often as well a natural kind of resistance to it and a rebellion against it also, which is
Yeah, I
fine
suppose it's
as
hard
well.
to explain. What did they say? What do they say?
They teach them. They teach people how to breathe, and people
Yeah,
are like,
that's straightforward.
"Yeah."
Jesus, that's very good. Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Right, you be, dude. Sure, I could be talking to you for ages.
Yes,
I'm dying to be a little bit nosy about that Wim Hof thing. You deflected me very well. I mean, I did
a good
notice.
media training.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. How are you doing, Frank? A nice deflection. So tell me about.
I
But is it like my impression? My impression was it's sort of like he's a wild lad, and anything's possible with him. So that's fair enough. I have no problem with that. But then you have a family and you have business people trying to make a load of money out of him.
yeah,
Now that's
yeah.
I don't exonerate. I actually don't know. I just kind of got the sense that there's sort of some bashing of him going on, which I don't know I don't know.
Yeah, and there definitely is, and I think some of it is unjustified. Like, Wim is a great person, and he's just a pioneering kind of wild character that kind of went out and found these things basically and brought them back to us. Now Wim was very vocal about lots of things, big pharma, etc., etc. And
Ah,
I do sometimes wonder, when people start taking a bashing, there's probably truth to lots of stuff. But is there other things at play also? You know, if a person like Wim becomes too big, too vocal about certain topics, does it have a repercussion as well?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so who knows? Who
Well,
knows?
I'm not even going to mention doctor names just in case, because this is the first podcast. But my podcast was literally destroyed. Like
Yeah,
it literally went like this. That Peter guy, he was on the
yeah,
largest podcast in the world, one week, and then my podcast the following week at smallest in the world. And but like I did three or four, and then everything just went vump and remained
yeah,
so. And I had a warning on my channel.
yeah,
So, but sorry, then, so I have first-hand experience of
yeah.
that. But was there any allegations about him or anything like that, or is
There was the firstly, which was there was a big case in America where a girl unfortunately drowned in her pool or something like that. And the dad of the girl was suing lots of people, and they tried to sue Wim Hof Method and Wim
okay?
and all the and try to
That's
link
very
link it
random.
back
Yeah,
to it.
right.
And but you know how it goes these days, like that was headlines all over the world. But then obviously the case was thrown out and totally
That's absolutely
unfounded.
cracked. Really? So that
But
was one. Okay.
but you know how it goes these days, though. You know, like
Yeah,
all
yeah,
of the
100%.
it's
Yeah.
kind of like it's a headline globally for a day or two, and even though the case is totally unfounded, for a lot of people, that they
Doesn't
just
matter.
remember
No,
the
no, no. That's all.
headline.
That's all. That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. It's just
So
like
I
a
think,
little bit of mud, and mud does stick, and people move
yeah.
on. They don't even question it afterwards, sir.
So I think there's been a bit of that. Wim's heart is definitely in the right place.
Hmm.
His motives have always been very clear, and his love for people is always very evident. But I think when a company becomes a global mega kind of corporation,
Hmm.
there's always growing pains. There's always you know there's always things happening internally that might reflect the pioneer or the figurehead or whatever it might be. But
Hmm.
yes, it's yeah. We live
Okay.
in kind of complicated times where
You can't say
there is
anything.
this, but there's a strange kind of censorship. There's a
Hmm.
strange kind of censorship.
Well, there is, yeah.
So I think that's probably part of what's happened to Wim as well.
Okay,
It's
so there's
kind of a
nothing else. That
backlash.
was it, really.
There was stuff about their past, the family's past as well. Growing up and um, at the period when I think Wim's wife had killed herself, and the children. It was very kind of complicated family stuff that was all dragged up into the kind of public domain as well. I
Wow.
don't know what parts of it were true, what parts weren't true, but again,
Hmm.
you know how it is. These massive headlines appear about whatever whatever was going on, and it might be real, it might be not real, but it doesn't really matter,
Doesn't matter.
because
No. Yeah.
the headlines burst onto the scene, and then it disappears, and then the mud sticks already, or people associate the name with whatever happened, even though
Yeah.
it mightn't turn out to be anything. No, there might be truth to some of it. Who knows? I'm not really sure, but
Hmm.
we live in kind of a strange time that the global media can be used as a great force for good, but it also has this, things can change very quickly for people.
Yeah, I mean, probably, yeah. I think that if it's in the media and people are talking about it, then there's an agenda, really. It's like the Musk thing at the moment. He's gone from front cover of Time magazine to suddenly everybody hating him, and people actually
Yeah.
don't really know why they hate him.
But I suppose all companies and media companies are the same, have a set of priorities which are an agenda, and
Mm.
they're kind of working towards them. And I suppose maybe in the past people thought that media companies maybe were looking for the truth, but really they're just a company.
Yeah,
They're
they are. Yeah,
really
yeah.
they're just they're not harbingers of truth or anything.
No,
They're
no,
they're just a company.
yeah. That's a full podcast anyway.
That's
In
an
itself.
underground on Rumble.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very cool. All right, dude. I'm not going to keep you, but you're definitely, I want to buy a coffee. I'd love to just chat to
Yes.
you in general, about you,
Yep.
pick your brain if that was, so I'm going to
Absolutely love
harass
that.
you. Yeah.
Yep. Please do.
In
Please
the
do.
next, in the next couple of weeks or so. Would that
Yeah,
work
I'm
for you?
here next week, and then I'm away for a few weeks. But we'll find a date. Love to chat.
Okay. All right. Sweet. Okay. Well, I might aim for next week. I'll press stop here. Thank you very much. And I will put all links and stuff like that. Because this is going to explode.
We're going global.
Oh yeah, huge. Yeah. I just press stop and there we go.